there are strong rumours that you hear, just walking in these circles, that they are backing Badenoch. And I will not assert this as a fact claim, but I will examine the evidence for doing so. Now, Badenoch set out her stand in the leadership election with this piece in the Times. She says, 3 weeks ago, Britain relieved our party of the responsibility of government with the most brutal efficiency. The message was clear. Enough. The electorate did not make a mistake. We deserved to lose because the past decade saw us twist and turn in the wind, unsure of who we were, what we were for, and how we could build a new country. And so the first task for the next Conservative leader is renewal. When Badenoch says Conservative values matter, they are more than platitudes. They matter because of their enduring power to transform lives. Notice who she then goes on to position herself as proximate to. So she says, history shows us what we can achieve when we win the trust of the British people. Disraeli, expanding the franchise. Churchill, bringing our country together in its darkest hour. Thatcher, turbocharging our ambition and drive. Right, so the first Jewish Prime Minister who expanded the franchise. A very liberal universalist thing to do. We can debate the merits of that, but it's not touting the social conservatism of Pitt the Younger, for example, or even the moral righteousness of William Gladstone's campaign to abolish the slave trade on Christian grounds. It's couched in, well, we expanded the franchise because we believe that everyone should have a vote. And then, of course, Winston Churchill, the sort of biscuit tin banging nationalism of the Second World War, and also Margaret Thatcher, the first female prime minister who has been microwaved over and over, had her corpse puppeteered around by the Conservative Party anytime they get unpopular, because they like to harken back to the days that she helped beat the Soviet Union and busted the unions. Never mind the fact that, one, her philosophy of upgrading and globalizing markets run roughshod over both the deeply entrenched interests of communities and mining towns who have not moved on since and have left behind many of those towns and made the Conservative brand radioactive to them until a brief break in 2019 over Brexit, but also set the stage for Tony Blair, who she said was the best part of her legacy, to then bring in unlimited numbers of people with the arrogant belief that by making contact with secular liberal capitalism in Britain, they would shed all of their tribal priors. Well, obviously not, because we just had a second-generation Rwandan stab a bunch of children in a dance class, or the chap who came over and killed a pensioner in Blackpool saying it's for Palestine, or the Palestine marches themselves, or the 7/7 bombers, or the Manchester Arena bombers, or the Liverpool taxicab bomber, or the Reading stabber, or any of these limitless numbers of examples that you cannot just walk through the gates of Gatwick or Heathrow, or show up on a boat at the White Cliffs of Dover, and they act as magic portals transmogrifying you to become as British as you and me. And this is baked into the logic of Thatcherism, I'm afraid. So, as much as she likes to say these conservative values, they're liberal values. And it's not a course correction. The kind of course correction that Suella Braverman and, to his credit, Robert Jenrick have both urged. And she says, the country will not vote for us if they do not know who we are or what we want to be. That is why I am seeking the leadership of the Conservative Party to renew our movement and, with the support of the British people, get it to work for the country again. However, I cannot do this alone. In recent years, we've placed our faith in the talents of one individual. Those days are over. Presidential politics don't work in the UK. We'll see. Conservatism must become a team effort once again as we renew our party from top to bottom. A new respect for our members who in their daily lives are the backbones of communities across our country, but are sneered at and pilloried by elitist commentators. Then why are your buddies at CCHQ ousting people like me, Kemi? It's because this is a paper candidacy. It's to capture the energy that is being directed behind reform and candidates like Suella or Robert Jenrick, and to position herself as, I'm a base black woman who takes on critical race theory, but in substance doesn't commit to the bonfire of Brexit legislation, agrees with ESG's aims, just not its efficacy, is happy to use identity politics against David Tennant as a white man when he says some reprehensible, by the way, things at the LGBT awards telling us to shut up because she attempted to, well, she got the gender issue right, but then she always positioned it as because it's attacking gay kids. No, it's mutilating children. And it's based on an untruth. It wouldn't matter whether or not those kids are gay or straight, Kemi. That's not the reason why transgenderism is wrong. She coaches all of her concerns in very liberal priors. And so she will not do anything substantive to right the Conservative ship. And you can see it in here. Alongside this, we failed to spot the forces lining up against British values. British values, not British identity, values. As if someone in Nigeria can hold British values and be more British than King John, who did not hold British values. We had to draft the Magna Carta to constrain his tyranny, but he was an Englishman. This is a contention that isn't resolved. And so I don't want to be lectured by a Nigerian immigrant about British identity. It's not just a set of plastic values that you can wear and lose like an old coat, I'm afraid. We sought to build an increasingly liberal society, but liberalism has been hacked. So it's not liberalism's fault. It's something outside liberalism. Doesn't understand the problem. Our empathy with those fleeing persecution has been exploited to create an asylum system that has effectively opened borders to anyone willing to lie about their circumstances. Legislative improvements ensuring that everyone can be treated equally irrespective of race, sex, or religion have morphed into a nasty identity politics that seeks to divide based on these characteristics. No, by design. It was that. The Equality Act always sought to entrench protected characteristics as a hierarchy. Kemi. This is why you would not commit to scrapping it. She never wanted to scrap the Equality Act, and she will not. And again, she's happy to invoke identity politics against David Tennant. So when it's advantageous to her to get ahead for her career, she's happy to invoke them. She says, under the guise of politeness and good manners, free speech and the freedom to dissent is curtailed, exemplified by Labour scrapping the Higher Education Act, or kicking people like me out of the Conservative Party. Funny that. So, look, she's trying to position herself as akin to Thatcher. Here's this puff piece about her. But I think it's interesting to look at some of her biographical details, right? So, formerly, Kemi Adegoke, Badenoch when she married Hamish Badenoch, more on him later. She joined Lord Peter Lilly's Global Poverty Commission, supervised by David Cameron in 2006. She then stood as a candidate in Dulwich and West Norwood in 2009 and came third. She became an MP in 2017 in the disastrous Theresa May snap election for the safe Conservative seat of Saffron Walden, now redistricted and named as North West Essex. But her background in this article is very interesting. Badenoch was born into the elite strata of Nigerian society. Her father, Femi, who died in 2022, God rest his soul, was a GP who rose to running his own hospital in Lagos before founding a publishing company and later becoming a prominent activist for the rights of his Yoruba ethnic group. Oh, that's interesting. So there is ethnic tribal politics at play, and you are allowed to do that when it advantages an oppressed group, but not the English. Instead, we have to be completely liberal, and it's just British values. Curious. Her mother, Faye, was for 43 years a professor of physiology at the University of Lagos and was a president of the Nigerian Society for Endocrinology. So very enterprising, very academic Nigerians. Fantastic. Happy for them to provide for their family and the like and raise a daughter, clearly appreciative of both of her parents. Medical complications led to Faye travelling to the UK in 1980 to give birth to her daughter in a private maternity hospital in Wimbledon before returning to Lagos, where Badenoch grew up, going on to study at the International School, University of Lagos, one of the best schools in Nigeria. Right, so she was born in the UK, moved straight back to Nigeria, raised in Nigeria, and so has become a universal person. So raised in academia, raised in those economically enterprising institutions by economically entrepreneurial parents, and happy to flit between nations wherever the job prospects best. And so when she talks about British values, this is because it is a set of tenets that you could ascribe to that, if transplanted anywhere else, hypothetically, would upgrade that nation to the same status as Britain. We're not considering the long history and the affiliations and the preferences of the peoples in those locations, just as we didn't when we tried to transport democracy to Iraq and Afghanistan. This is the same mentality. It has failed, it has been repudiated, and this is the fuel in the Badenoch engine. Just about who's driving the car. So, at the age of 16, as political violence and repression consumed Nigeria, Badenoch's parents sent her to Britain to live with a family in Morden in South London. After graduating with a Master's of Engineering, she worked in IT as a software engineer at night, studying law at Birkbeck, University of London, graduating as a Bachelor of Laws in 2009. She went on to work as a systems analyst at the Royal Bank of Scotland and pursue a career in consultancy and financial services, working as an associate director at the private bank of wealth manager at Coutts in 2006 to 2013. So one of the international financial class. We've just gotten rid of Rishi Sunak saying he's disconnected for the same thing, and now the ostensibly right wing of the Tory party are about to elect someone doing the exact same thing here, with the plastic rhetoric of populism and culture wars, but the background of the international managerial elite. She also, at the same time, became a London Assembly member in 2015 and 2016, after leaving Coutts, and was working as digital director at The Spectator magazine. This is very important. Look at who is in her corner. She worked at the Spectator magazine at the same time that James Forsyth, who was Rishi Sunak's political secretary, who led his campaign into electoral oblivion, was the political editor at the Spectator. And look who's promoting ties between Badenoch and Michael Gove, right? The man who knows where all the bodies are buried in the Conservative Party and continually got cabinet positions despite failing. Curious that. He gets the scoop on Gove coming out and endorsing Kemi for Conservative Party leader in 2022. Gove's support is a coup for Badenoch, Forsyth writes. It's not every day that someone throws their weight behind someone who was their junior minister until a few days ago. Gove makes a typically eloquent case. I mean, if he blew more smoke up her ass, she'd be flying, you know? Look who got the scoop as well on Munira Mirza quitting Boris Johnson's cabinet. James Forsyth. Now, you might be thinking, who's Munira Mirza? Okay. Munira Mirza was a number 10 advisor who resigned after Boris Johnson, at Prime Minister's Questions, said that Keir Starmer had, in his role as chief prosecutor, neglected to prosecute the Jimmy Savile case. Now, I don't think that's true in that he had actively avoided prosecuting it. I think it's a failure on his part that he did not take the case seriously enough, but it's not like he actively avoided prosecuting Savile as a paedophile. Right? Mirza resigned over that. Why am I raising this? Well, James Forsyth was the best man at Rishi Sunak's wedding. He is also close with Munira Mirza. As detailed in this Independent article, Miss Mirza is reportedly a friend of the Spectator's James Forsyth, who broke the story of her quitting. Mr. Forsyth is married to Mr. Johnson's former press secretary, Allegra Stratton, who resigned at the beginning of the Partygate saga. Remember the woman laughing on camera, saying that it was a meeting, it was ha ha ha, no it wasn't, how are we going to spin this to public? James Forsyth, former editor of The Spectator, friend of Kemi Badenoch, friend of Munira Mirza, best man at Rishi Sunak's wedding, was also leading Rishi Sunak's campaign in number 10. There is a web of relationships. Remember, politics is about relationships. Web of relationships here, right? While Miss Stratton, before moving to the Prime Minister's team, had been Director of Strategic Communications for Rishi Sunak and Mr. Forsyth, and the Chancellor has been friends since attending Winchester College together and are the godparents to one another's children. Lord Ashcroft, who wrote a biography of the Chancellor, previously said Mr. Forsyth helped Mr. Sunak get into politics by introducing him to Miss Mirza's husband, Dougie Smith. If you've heard that name before, it should not surprise you that Rishi Sunak got as far as he did. If you don't know who Miss Mirza is, well, here's an accusation from Andrea Jenkins after endorsing Priti Patel, saying that Kemi Badenoch is a party stooge. Why would she possibly think that? Let's look to Nadine Dorries' book. Now, Nadine Dorries is not the most credible source, so take everything here with an unbelievable mountain of salt, because Nadine Dorries is notorious for giving strange interviews and doing odd TikToks, right? Though, that being said, the plot is an interesting book. Carl and I will cover it at some point, and if Miss Dorries would like to speak to us about it, just as it was for Liz Truss and any other politician, and hopefully some more soon, the door will be open to her. However, I must preface this with, these are claims coming from Nadine Dorries, and I'm merely exploring the coincidental evidence. But Dorries is, in her book, quoting a source saying, Gove has been a big part of the plan to nuke Boris forever, and here he was in no way benefiting from all of this plotting and meddling. He's also been building up Kemi Badenoch as the next leader of the Conservative Party because that was part of the plan and still is. He's been mentoring Kemi for a long time, possibly originally at Dougie's behest, Dougie Smith, Munira Mirza's husband. Allegedly. Dorries writes, she told Johnson, you know all roads lead to Gove, don't you? I said to Boris, not for the first time, Cummings is Gove, Gove is Cummings, Smith is Gove, Dougie Smith, and Gove is Smith. Dr. No, he is everywhere and everyone, this mysterious figure who's pulling the strings in the Conservative Party. The identity of Dr. No is rumoured. I won't be saying it here. Whenever any of them are exposed, it's Gove who dives straight in to protect them. He fights them all. Boris turned to the window and clasped his fingers together on the desk. He fought for what felt like an age. I think you're right, he said. I think you're right. There were people telling me I should have sacked Gove a long time ago. He wasn't delivering. He was insubordinate. Now, what's funny is everyone who's ever worked with Gove says basically the same thing. If they've fallen afoul of the internal party mechanisms. Liz Truss, in 10 Years to Save the West, her book that I interviewed her about, says similar things. There were many leaks about the arguments around animal welfare and the Australian trade deal in the press when she was working at DEFRA. I got a call from Boris, so not DEFRA, sorry, when she was International Trade Secretary during Boris Johnson's government. I got a call from Boris who asked me if I'd leaked anything. It was obviously not in my interest to do so. I told him it had been Gove, and what did he expect, given Gove was a serial offender? I asked him if he thought Gove had been leaking. He replied, the bear's shit in the woods. After Theresa May steps down, she writes, there was no way I was going to support Gove, her former mentor at the Department of Education, by the way, after his betrayal of Boris last round. I'd since grown appalled over his manoeuvring to thwart a hard Brexit. So Michael Gove was trying to prevent hard Brexit despite campaigning for Brexit. Duplicitous figure. She notes Dominic Cummings was installed in the Department of Education by Gove. Cummings notoriously named Liz Truss the human hand grenade because he hated her. And then taken up by Boris Johnson in number 10, despite obviously Gove and Boris's bitter rivalry since the 2017 leadership election where Gove took him out of the running. In her biography, Out of the Blue, written by James Heal from The Spectator and Harry Cole at Sun, says, delivering a speech to the LSE, Truss complained of an excess of Whitehall regulation while at DEFRA. She joked, too often we're hearing about not drinking too much, eating too many donuts, or enjoying the warm glow of our wood-burning stoves. I can see their point. There's enough hot air and smoke at the Environment Department already. This was after Gove had met with Greta Thunberg. That night, Gove texted Truss, I've now seen the content of your speech and I'm not happy. She called. He didn't answer. There's another quote. An insider recalls, they were really trying to kill her, Truss. I think Cummings and Kane really hated her. Frankly, this is where Gove turned on her too. When Cummings hit the headlines with Barnard Castle lockdown-breaking escapades in 2020, Truss was one of the few cabinet ministers to refuse to do a centrally ordered tweet in support of his unorthodox Rose Garden press conference. In a July leaked letter, Truss had written to Sunak, warning delaying the implementation of new EU trading laws until the following year risked major smuggling threats and could break international law, only made relations with number 10 worse. Why would disagreeing with Sunak make relations with number 10, Cummings, Gove, Mercer at the time, Smith, even worse, unless there was some sort of unified front between all of them? Within days of being sent, the letter found its way to Business Insider, a relatively unknown outfit for such a targeted and damaging leak. The fact that it was CC'd to Michael Gove heightened paranoia in Truss circles, but she got full blame from number 10 for the leak, something she ferociously denies to this day. And in the 2022 leadership election, Michael Gove came up for Rishi Sunak, suggesting Truss's campaign had been a, quote, holiday from reality. He then threw a mini-budget under the bus on Laura Kuenssberg's show, clearly feeling snubbed that she didn't give him a cabinet position. So if Kemi's in league with Gove, why did they have a falling out? Now, there's an interesting iNews article here that details their connection. And it says, despite her firm assertions that plotters in Nadine Dorries' book were not her friends, revelation were that Kemi was part of a WhatsApp group entitled Evil Plotters, and it's undermined her statements ever since. Michael Gove, obviously, is the one that's alleged to dedicating himself to sabotaging Boris Johnson's premiership, even though Boris himself was friends with Mercer and Smith. But Kemi being in this group doesn't exactly look good for her. No one denies that the group exists and features some serving MPs who are admirers of Badenoch. The standout name on her fan sheet is Michael Gove. That was a daring trial run at the job and the beginning of a Govenoch alliance, the 2022 leadership race that Badenoch participated in, which may prove formative to the Tories' fate. It was Gove who was clear during Suella Braverman's resignation that this was not the moment for a great right-wing breakaway that many of Sunak's detractors had hoped for. They're using Badenoch to contain the reform-style swing. The net effect was to isolate Braverman, who, as the more extreme voice, and they've isolated her now, with her heated rhetoric aimed at Gaza protesters, left Badenoch positioned for a broader appeal. This is why those leaks came out a couple of weeks ago that I covered in my How to Rebuild the Right thing, where Badenoch has said, Suella had a mental breakdown, the Tory party needed to self-reflect, but Suella's rhetoric wasn't helpful. She is strategically leaking her own shadow cabinet meetings, according to a theory, of course. At least someone is who is on Badenoch's side, because it makes her look good and makes Suella look radioactive. And they've succeeded because they've isolated Suella out from the race. They've made it so that Suella's supporters fall behind Jenrick because they think that's the only thing that can stop Badenoch, and Badenoch is now the clear frontrunner. Now, there were rumours that the alliance had broken because Michael Gove apparently had an affair with a female colleague and friend of Badenoch's. I'm shocked that Michael Gove had an affair with a female colleague and friend of Badenoch's, but there we go. At one point, they apparently weren't on speaking terms, but the prior eye reporting does note fences are, I gather, since mended, but it is a sign that those who would like to be close to a rising star, Badenoch, might have to reckon with heated moments or quarrels. So there's bad blood, but they're still tethered together. By who? Well, here's the Manira Mirza connection. Manira Mirza runs Civic Future, by the way, and I've spoken to some people over there, and they're good people, but that's a sort of training body for future civil servants. So she has a history in the Revolutionary Communist Party. She studied under Frank Furedi at the University of Kent, joined the Revolutionary Communist Party, and still described herself as left-wing until 2018, when she was working in conservative politics after working for Boris Johnson as London mayor. So she's a sort of long marcher, no doubt. It's interesting in here, in this article from the Guardian on Kemi Badenoch, the Times reports it is Dougie Smith, an influential fixer in Number 10's team, who is championing Badenoch's candidacy for the education role, with a source quoted she is fighting his war on woke. Smith's wife, Manira Mirza, who is head of the Prime Minister's policy unit, is said to have joined Badenoch in influencing Johnson's controversial move away from acknowledging the feeling of injustice among BLM protesters. It just so happens Manira Mirza put together the Race Equality Commission that propelled Badenoch to stardom. Remember when everyone was saying that Kemi Badenoch is our based black woman? Callum was saying it for ages on this channel. Wrong call, I'm afraid. Thank you for watching that clip from Tomlinson Talks. If you liked that and you would like to see more, you can get the full 90-minute show every week on a Wednesday afternoon, live from 3 p.m, only on lotuseaters.com, and all of the other content that my colleagues produce behind the paywall for as little as £5 a month. Thank you very much for supporting us, and I hope to see you there. Until next time, goodbye.